pana posła Agnew.
Thank you, Chairman. To the first presentation, I see that climate change must be tackled under Pillar 1. I really don't know what that means. Pillar 1 is direct payments to farmers. How are those payments going to alter to farmers because they claim they're able to change the world's weather? That does need to be explained a little bit more. Somebody else in here has already mentioned, well, you mentioned CO2, but you didn't mention the 4 other greenhouse gases. Why just carbon dioxide? And then there was a table, and I thought the left-hand side was a very good idea about water. This is a scarce resource, and it's not a bad idea that farmers can trade their entitlements so it's all used efficiently. Of course, as everyone knows in here, I dispute that farmers can change the world's weather, but there we are. On the second presentation, I'd actually quite like a copy of the tables you did about the way different countries support agriculture. There were 1 or 2 things on there I hadn't heard before. Will they be available? And a question, on one of your slides, it said that New Zealand barely or scarcely subsidises its agriculture, and yet that tiny 1% apparently causes an 81% distortion of trade. I just don't see how that can happen at all. I mean, the New Zealand farmer produces something and offers it and sells it to a customer, and either the customer wants it or the customer doesn't. How is the trade being distorted by an absence of subsidy? And the third speaker was from Australia, and I'm sorry, I was called away to go and vote in another committee at 4 o'clock. And when I got there, I'd been informed that they actually had the vote at 3 o'clock. But the chairman hadn't bothered to tell anyone, and I'm quite certain that the chairman in this committee would never ever do that. Thank you.
Another question you asked us about the gaps in the current policy and what instruments might be there. And I had mentioned in my presentation about tackling climate change in the first pillar, and it was another question that came up. How can you do that? Well, I think, there has been substantial investment on research around climate change, and there are lots of farm practices and technologies that have been identified that can reduce the impact of agriculture on the environment through greenhouse gas emissions. I use the expression carbon footprint. By that I mean the carbon equivalent of all of those greenhouse gas emissions put together. I think by having a suite of farm practices or technologies that can reduce the carbon footprint of food production supported through the first pillar is a possible way forward within the CAP.